Hey, how you going? Mark here. Look, I just ran the worst webinar I've ever run. So I've been doing this for a number of years now, and I just absolutely stuffed up a webinar. So this is the retake. Let me give you a quick, 60-second version there. So webinar on how to create a value prop that doesn't flop. And last couple of days I've been down in Melbourne running training sessions. And what I hadn't noticed is up had popped a notification that my Zoom subscription had failed to renew because I had a new credit card. Happens to us all, right? And then as a result, when I went to kick the webinar off 15 minutes beforehand, I couldn't find the template, blah blah blah. And then when I did finally sign up, what I realised is that none of the pre-event communications had gone out because the subscription had cancelled, so nobody got the notification that it was on, and all my settings had changed. So that was a real challenge. So I had bumbled my way through that. So this is a retake on that one. Anyway, so there you go. So that was the worst webinar I think I've ever run. This is the retake on that. So this is the retake on create a value prop that doesn't flop. And I'm going to share with you how you can do that relatively quickly and relatively easily, and some of the mistakes that people are making, or that I'm seeing people make time and time again, and how to rectify that. So it's going to be valuable for many of you, I'm sure. All right, so this will be of value for you if you're seeing people respond to your emails and they're saying unsubscribe, take me off the list, that sort of stuff, or if you're hitting them up on the phone and they're telling you, look man, I'm just not interested. So if you're getting those responses, then this value prop session, making sure your value prop doesn't flop, is going to be good for you. So let's just take a step back. So first of all, if you're getting the unsubscribe request from people via email, that's a good thing. And I know that sounds like it's a weird thing to say, but at least you're landing in the inbox, and at least they're responding. So this is going to be good for your email deliverability, because this is a really big thing, and I don't want to spend too much time on it now. But the more people that respond to you, the better quality your email domain is seen. So you want people responding. You don't want people marking you as spam, right? So if people are responding saying unsubscribe, that's a win. Of course, we want them to replying saying, hey man, how can I get some more of this information? And if you're on the telephone call and you're getting through the phone call and they're saying not interested, then we know that it's a value prop. If they're saying unsubscribe, then we know it's probably going to be the value prop. Couple of things on both of these channels first before we assume that it's a value prop, right? So we need to do the correct diagnosis. If people are saying unsubscribe, just have a quick check of things like your subject line. Make sure that's not spammy, or there's all those things we've talked about before in subject line creation. Preview text. Make sure your preview text is not setting you up for failure. Is it saying hope you're well? Is it saying any of those sorts of cliches that typical salespeople put in the top of their email? You want the preview text to be valuable, so that they have to read, and create intrigue, so they have to read your email. So that's the idea there. If you're doing that and then they're getting into your email and the email has got, hope you're well, one sentence, 3 bullet points, one sentence and a Calendly link, it probably looks like every other piece of cold email out there, and it's getting deleted too easily, or you're getting unsubscribes too quickly. Right, so let's assume that you've fixed all of those for email. On the cold calling side, let's assume also that you understand about the importance of the entry of the phone call. So you've got to be able to enter in with the right pace and the right tone. Don't speak as fast as I'm speaking now. Make sure you're speaking slow, you're speaking low, and you're coming in like a peer. You're not sounding like a salesperson. So what does that mean? That means you're not saying, hey Mark, hey Gary, this is Mark from ABC. Do you have a moment? Like, that sounds exactly like every other salesperson on the planet. So you need to make sure that you're doing something slightly different. Because if you are getting bumped out before you get a chance to talk about your pitch or give them your pitch, then it's all about the entry for you. If you are getting to the point where you're providing your pitch, then okay, maybe your entry's okay, but your value prop is not working correctly. So just want to give you a quick heads up there, because you need to get those things sorted out before you start working on your value prop, because it's no good having a great value prop if people are kicking you out because you sound like a telemarketer. It's no use having a great value prop if your email's not landing in the inbox. Make sense? All right. So I've got a 3-step process I want to share with you in relation to getting your value prop to make sure it doesn't flop. The first one is admitting that your baby is ugly. What the hell do I mean by that? Heaps of salespeople and sales leaders that I talk to tell me that they're focused on outcomes for their clients. When I look at their emails and their telephone scripts, it's actually not true. All I can see is them talking about how they've won awards, how they've helped other businesses, all this. They're actually talking about themselves, and they think that they're talking about outcomes. So go and have a look at your email right now. Go and have a look at your scripts. If you're using, if you're talking about you and using your business, you or your business as an excuse to engage, then you're probably talking about you rather than them. Check that you're not making these mistakes, because much like, Alcoholics Anonymous, is it the 12-step or 13-step program? I don't know. But the first step, I believe, is, admitting that you've got a problem. So admit that your baby's probably ugly. Go and have a look at your scripts. Okay, over time they change. Go and have a look at your emails. Over time they change. Make sure you're not saying, we're the number one provider, we're the biggest, we're the best. We've got the greatest customer service. No one gives a rat's about that stuff, right? And that's just making it easy for people to delete. So the first step is get rid of that stuff, all right? The second one is stop using "we help," because you think that this is going to be fun. And what I mean by that is, stop using things like "we help founders to do this." The challenge with this is you think that it's going to be client-centric because you're talking about how you help founders. What it actually does is makes it easy for you to say, we help founders by doing this, and then whatever the this is actually the features and how you do it, right? And nobody's interested in that. They're interested in the outcomes. So we want to provide outcomes wrapped in a problem solved. I probably should have had a slide for this, right? So you want to provide outcomes wrapped in a problem solved. So stop saying, we help founders double their revenue and grow their business through a mentorship program. So this is one of the examples that I'm talking, right? So one of the guys that we help is a sales consultancy. They go into businesses and they help the founders create a repeatable and scalable process, right? But if I talk to that about, if I use that as the script to talk to a founder, that's what we do. They're going to say, oh no, I don't need that. I've already got one. Or that doesn't sound like me. I'm good, right? So whilst you can use that to describe what it is that you do when you're meeting people at a networking event, it's not how you should try and engage people through cold outreach. So how would you do that from the founder's point of view? So instead of saying we help founders build a scalable and repeatable sales process through fractional sales leadership or a mentorship program, you would say, well, and typically people would say, well, who is this and what do you want? So if we're talking about a cold call, it's who is it and what do you want? And you go, well, we work with a bunch of other founders in the same sort of area, and you'd name that. So, in tech businesses. And what we know is that founders are overly reliant on their own ability to create revenue month to month. So every month, even though you've got a sales team, you have to bring in a few dollars, because that's how you're going to make the business keep going and balance the balance sheet. How are you guys, am I close to the mark there, or are you able to not focus on sales every single month? And you'll notice the difference there, right? So what I've done is I've focused on the outcomes, which is not having to focus on sales every month, wrapped in a problem, right? So the problem is founders are typically still having to write business, even though they've got a sales team. They've got to go out there, meet clients, and they're responsible for creating a bunch of revenue. And why is that? Because they don't have a repeatable and scalable process. So only when they go, that sounds like us, and you go, well, we help people build out a scalable and repeatable sales process through a fractional sales mentorship program, right? Only then can you share that rest of the stuff. So what's the outcome wrapped in a problem solved? What's the outcome? Founders need to stop being reliant on their own ability to drive revenue, because they need to spend more time building the business. How do they do that? Through getting some support from a fractional sales leadership and a mentorship program. There you go. All right. But instead of saying we help founders build a scalable and repeatable process, instead you talk about the problem and you wrap it in the outcomes. You talk about the outcomes and you wrap it in the problem solve. All right. So we know that founders spend too much of their time, or they're too reliant on their own sales input month to month. Most months, founders have to contribute to the revenue, even though they've got a sales team or a sales function, and this means they can't spend as much time as they want on strategy and growing the business. Does that sound like you, or do you not have to focus on sales every month? Right, and then the question that you ask at the end of that is the perfect picture, right? So you get them to project forward. So stop using we help and start focusing on the outcomes. Another example that we could use is if you're selling software in the accounting space, for example. Instead of saying, look, we provide software and we help accounts teams to operate more efficiently and be more compliant, which is probably true. Instead, you talk about it this way. Well, we know that local councils do tens of thousands of payments every month. And of that, quite a few percentage, about 8% of those payments are non-compliant. So what that means is, the payments try to go and there's ABNs aren't correct, or there's no ABN at all, or perhaps even the bank account details are incorrect. That means that your accounts team has to go back and re-enter all of that data after that first payment, and that can slow the process down, and it's not great for your supplier relationships, and it's not great for community relationships. Have you guys got that sorted? Or you could say, is that what you find? Or are all of your payments going through perfectly every time? Because of course, they're not going to be able to say that unless they had our software. So again, what is it that we do? We help, accounts payable be more compliant and make sure all their payments go through on time. So we save them time. But if you mention that, they're going to say, well, that doesn't seem to be relevant to me. But if instead you say, we know that there's a whole bunch of payments that aren't going to be compliant when you press go every month, and as a result, your team's going to have to go back in there, or you're going to have to go back in there and redo a whole bunch of payments manually and try and find ABNs, etc., and it's going to suck up a bunch of your time, then that's an outcome wrapped in problem solved. Make sense? Okay, and so the third part of this that I think is really the most important, and this is where we sort of need to start, right, is we have to understand what are your prospects' 3 biggest priorities right now. So the great thing about this little thing is go and ask this question. You can sit down by yourself, but it works much better if you've got somebody to do it with. So whether it's with your team, or if you're a sales leader, you can do it with your team, or you can do it with just one other person. You get the idea. Get a really strong picture of your ICP, and then figure out what their 3 biggest priorities are. Now, if you think about those 2 examples that I've shared, and you're selling mentorship programs or you're selling accounting, you'd probably say, well, accountants, one of their biggest priorities right now is to be compliant. That's you looking through the lens of having a hammer. You sell hammers and everything looks like a nail. Figure out exactly what it is that their biggest 3 priorities are. Do some research. If you can Google it, if you can talk to some people that are in the role, talk to some existing customers, talk to potential customers, talk to the accounts payable in your own business. What are their 3 biggest priorities right now? And then tie your product or service to helping them hit those priorities. For example, yes, founders are always focused on revenue, but it's probably not their biggest 3 priorities right now. Probably their 3 biggest priorities include things like making sure they don't lose the business that they've got, managing and maintaining their staff, okay, and developing their staff, and looking after their cash flow. Okay. Further down the list is building a scalable and repeatable revenue process. But if you can say, we can help you be free from having to sell stuff all the time so that you can spend more time on those other things, then we can align the sales mentorship program with what we think or what we know is going to be their top 3 priorities, which means that we improve the level of relevance, means we're less likely to get ghosted, means we're more likely to get a deeper conversation as we go through. So what we're trying to do here is align our products and services with their relevance. What about the accounts teams? What do we think their 3 biggest priorities might be right now? So if you're selling compliance software, you're probably going to say, well, I think being compliant is probably one of the most important things they need to be focusing on right now. The reality is that's probably not the case. So what would be those 3 biggest priorities? Well, they're probably worried about, well, I know I've done some research on this. So their biggest priorities right now is how can they automate as much of the payments process, incoming and outgoing, as possible. How can they take any menial tasks away from their staff and give them more high value tasks? How can they keep their staff engaged? So they're their 3 biggest priorities right now. And if we're able to use our software solution to help them achieve that, and we can, but if we use that language that we used earlier on, then we're going to be relevant. We're going to be able to get into a conversation. We're not going to get not now. We're not going to get kicked out. So they're the three things that I think we need to be focused on to make sure your value prop doesn't flop. Okay? Admit that you're probably making the mistakes now. Everybody thinks that everybody thinks that they're not being feature benefited, they're not providing features and benefits in their outreach. But when I have a look at them, they absolutely are. So my guess is you are as well. So have a cold hard look, get real, remove all of that you out of your email and your outreach and place it with them. Remove the we help mindset. Okay? That's a great way to describe what it is that you do to your friends and the people that you meet. It's not a great value prop. Okay? The way to do that is figure out what are your three biggest priorities, what are their three biggest priorities, and how can you tie your products or services to those priorities. Okay, that's it. I did a little bit better job there than I did this morning. So for those of you that are watching the replay because the first one was so awful, apologies and thank you. All right, everybody, I hope that ticks the box for another super short power session from Mark McGuinness. Ciao. I'll see you out there. Have a cracking day.